Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Two Old Heads, Mike Pinnock and myself. We don't have any guests on this week. Well, I say apart from a couple of wee squirrels that might turn up somewhere during the broadcast. Basically, tonight's programme is to deal with a lot of the distractions that's going to become. Mike will tell you a lot about that just now.
Basically, what we're going to try and do, Dave, and it's a chat between you and me, is to look at what's ahead of the Yes movement over the next 4 months. Some of the things in our private chats we know are going to cause disruption, it's going to cause antagonism, it's going to cause people to take sides as things happen. But we also want to look at the positive things that are going to happen over the next 4 months and how the Yes movement can continue to keep totally focused on gaining this country's independence. So it's a mixture of two things, some positive, some negative. I want to start, however, in one of the shows we did earlier on was with Jim Fairley. And Jim Fairley's article's appearing in the National today with his proposals, with a central, very important theme. He makes the comment that the people are sovereign.
Yeah.
And it's a thing I've mentioned in every show, I think every show we've done, which is I've not yet seen the Yes movement exercise their sovereignty. And that's one of the most important things I think will come out of this discussion between us. We've got to find ways whereby we're not waiting for permission. We're not waiting for people up there as opposed to us down here in the Yes movement doing something. That's been too much of what's happened over the past few years. We keep waiting and waiting and waiting. People are getting fed up with waiting. And if there are ways of exercising the sovereignty of the people of Scotland, that's one of the things we're going to try and push in this discussion. But to kick off, let's start with a kind of calendar list of what we're going to look at very shortly. It's already started, but very shortly, we're going to witness the discussions and the meetings and people presenting themselves under oath in front of a committee in the Parliament who are looking into what happened in the process that led to Alex Salmond being questioned over what his conduct was. You've got a far better inside knowledge because you were at the courts, you've watched what's done, you've got contacts with people. So can I pass it to you for your perspective and what we're about to witness and how it might be divisive?
Well, basically, I think the main thing is that all the paperwork needs to be put in by the 4th of August. By that time, we'll have a fair good idea what's happening. Now, I don't know if they'll be released instantly because at the moment, I believe that any redactions that are supposed to be done by the committee themselves, although the civil service seem to have taken it upon themselves to actually send in a lot of redacted stuff. So I'm not quite sure exactly how long it will be after that before we actually find anything out. But so that's supposed to be in by the 4th of August. They're due to start hearing oral evidence at the end of August, probably around about the 25th, something like that, I believe. But I reckon over the next week we'll start to get a much better idea about what's happening. We've already seen things. Peter Murrell's been called up on oath. Which is interesting because we all knew about Ian McCann before, about what he'd done.
Yeah.
But now Peter Murrell's been called up, and as I say, I think there's going to be dynamite as far as that's concerned, because Peter Murrell's really run the SNP as his own private fiefdom for the last 11 or 12 years. And I think that's going to be very, very interesting.
See, as that progresses, I think there's going to be two things. Number one, waiting in the wings are the mainstream media,
yep,
who are going to report every negative aspect of this that they can actually achieve. Backed, I would have thought, by all the unionist politicians in the Parliament who will be having their say. on Facebook, Twitter, etc., the Yes movement are going to, there'll be an avalanche of posts about everything that happens, Dave.
Yep.
And all of that distracts from what we're trying to achieve, which is the independence of this country.
Yep.
Some people are going to be very upset because it's going to start, inevitably people will start taking sides, and it'll be very hard in the middle of all of that to keep a focus on it. I have a kind of different, and you know this, I've been slowly working my way through some of the papers that are already out, and I look at this slightly differently. I'm well aware of all the theories of the conspiracy and it was a stitch-up. I'm actually looking at it more from an actual process point of view, and there's two implications to this. I won't go into it in great detail. It's something I'll maybe post on, but as an example, one of the things in the paperwork that's been submitted by the Scottish Government is the way in which they approach the whole idea of processing it. The people involved, lots of people involved. If you actually look at the papers, the unions are involved, very highly paid civil servants are involved. And yet, once you start looking at the detail of what was involved, I would sack, if I was running the business, I would sack the civil servants, not because of the conspiracy side of things, but because of the sheer incompetence. And I'll give you one very quick example of this. There's a bit in it where it says, if the existing minister of the government or a former minister of the government who is a member of the current administration's party, that would be the SNP at the moment, then the matter will be investigated and reported eventually to the First Minister. It then goes on to say, however, if the former minister was a member of another administration which was formed by another party, going back, that would be the Labour Party, then the matter will be referred to the Labour Party for them to decide what the action is. In the middle of that, there's a third category which isn't even mentioned, which is if the former minister is no longer a member of the existing party and no longer a member of the previous party, i.e. they are standing as an independent. Now, without making any assumptions about who I'm referring to, I won't even mention names, there are at least two members of the administration who are no longer in a party. That's not even mentioned. So we've got a process that's meant to be looking at sexual harassment and other misdeeds by ministers and former ministers. It doesn't cover that category. And you sit down and say, wait a minute, what on earth are you doing? You spent months on this. You were meant to be looking at ministers and former ministers. And there's a whole category you don't even cover. Now, that's from reading the original papers put forward as they were processed, Dave. There's lots of changes and modifications to it. And then up to the one that was finally produced on the 31st of December 2017, which says, here is the final document. You sit down and you say, if you want to look at the conspiracy side of it, you would say, well, were they targeting something? Were they deliberately going after something and were so hell-bent on it? Ignoring other parties and other people just wasn't into their brain span. If you look at it from an administration, the cost of going through that whole process and leaving a huge gap is utterly wrong. And it's not the first time I've got involved in this. You know, I've got a petition going in about the Referendums Act. That has the same feel about it, where you sit down and say, well, look, I'm not a massively intelligent person, but I can read paperwork. And if you miss something out or you get it wrong, that has huge implications. I worry about that. I just mentioned that as part of this. It's very worrying that we have an administration which has faults within it. And that is an area which I think, as we come on to talk about the Covenant and the People's Assembly, that is where we at the bottom need to become more involved.
Yeah, basically some of the stuff that's been happening. As you say, I mean, there have been members of parties and actual members of the government who have had these problems, and basically been ignored because they're no longer in the party. But I would like to have a wee look at the fact that the original safety at work thing was put out by Alex Salmond himself when he was First Minister. I believe it was either 2007 or 2011, I think. And he introduced that to basically like protect people for these kind of things, and that's basically always been there. The
whole purpose of it, Dave, is to look after staff members.
Yes.
People working in the Parliament who are faced with people in power where their job is at risk.
Yep.
And that's why I come back to the fact that it's not just the conspiracy side of it, the stitch-up side of it that interests me. It's the fact that if you sit down and go through months of work, including the unions, and you end up missing out, what happens if a staff member has a complaint about a former minister who is no longer a member of a party? There is nothing in the process that tells her her or him where to go. That's wrong.
It explains why only one's ever been taken to court and the other two have been basically given a slap on the wrist and not allowed back into the party. But when you're talking about money, very interesting. Okay, like you say, how much did it cost to actually put that process together? Everybody's talking about the £500,000 that they lost in court cases to Alex Salmond, but how much money was actually spent by the government to put this flawed process into place in the first place?
And the investigation by the police.
Yeah, well, yeah, but that was not into this. That was into the criminal thing.
But one leads to the other, David.
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
If people don't realise that there is the famous. I think I'm allowed to say there's the famous. We've lost the battle, but we will win the war.
Yep. Miss Evans.
Anyway, leave that aside. Let's move on to something else, right? We're going to see an avalanche in this. It's going to make it difficult for the Yes movement to keep focused. Here's something else that's going to happen. I'm not too sure when it's going to happen, but I'd love to have Martin Keatings on, Bald Heats, once he's able to give us some more information on the court proceedings that he's got going. You know a bit more about that than I do.
I don't know so much about the actual the court case himself, because Martin's playing his cards very closely at his chest. He leaks little bits of information sometimes, but he very rarely gives you anything at all you can work anything out from. He'd be a good lawyer probably. But anyway, he throws little tidbits out on the water to keep you interested that doesn't actually tell you anything at all. But the case I believe is due to be heard sometime within the next month. There'll probably be a ruling on the back of that. Like maybe within a couple of weeks. I don't think there'll be a ruling instantly. Excuse me. But then, of course, depending which side wins, there'll be an appeal to the inner house of the court session, and then that'll go through. And I believe the court session will find for the people, because we are the people. I don't think it would find for the government, for the Scottish government, because the Scottish government is, by law of the Scotland Act 1998, it's actually subsidiary to Westminster, whereas the people are not, and I think because of that, under Scots law, that has to go. We have to win that. I mean, basically, you're going down to the thing for Lord Cooper in 1953 on the post office boxes. England's parliamentary sovereignty has no
relevance in Scotland.
No relevance under Scots constitutional law.
See why I raised that, apart from the actual proceedings that are going on, it's an example of where us down here did something. Martin, off his own bat, worked out that this was an important thing to do.
Yep.
Then asked the Yes movement, can you help me? Can you help fund this? And we did it.
Yep.
That is the Yes movement focused on doing something.
Yep.
When it was really kind of waiting on, will the government do anything? Now, the government have been forced, both governments, Westminster and in Scotland, have been forced to take part in those court proceedings. But it's an example for me of where the Yes movement can focus their attention, focus their sovereignty, and say, we want to find out the answer to this. Can our Parliament raise a referendum without reference to a Section 30 at any stage? Second stage of this, Dave, because I'll lead on to this in the Covenant in a second, is very simply, it is possible that it could be either a yes or a no.
Yep.
If it's a no, right, that eventually as it proceeds through everything, if it's a no, it doesn't change anything because the people's sovereignty still exists.
Exactly.
And it's how that can be expressed, even in adverse circumstances,
yep.
even without waiting, that to me is the critical part of what you and I are talking about tonight. Let me jump for a second to a positive. 27th of August, there will be a hoop resurrection at the Scottish Parliament. I know, again, you were involved in the first one. I know Cliff Service setting up the second one. Can you give us information on what's involved in that?
Yeah, basically, with the power grab now being effective, the original hoop was there to publicise almost 2.5 years ago now. We decided it was time to sort of renew our vows, if you like, to protect the Parliament. And of course, we've got COVID now, which causes a little bit of a problem and doing the kind of things that we've been doing before. But
yeah.
As far as I know, the idea is once again to put the ring around Parliament, but keeping everybody 2 metres apart. So we're not going to have quite as many people this time. But Cliff's asking everyone to have a 3-foot square placard where basically your message that you want to say, and then we can actually film it all the way around, and basically do the same kind of thing that we did on the first one. Well, less people due to the COVID situation. It's due to be held 4 weeks on Thursday.
27th of August.
Yeah, 4 weeks on Thursday, from 11 o'clock till 3 o'clock, going right through First Minister's questions. Interesting thing this time is that when you do things at Holyrood, you tend to have MSPs sneaking in back doors and sneaking out back doors and all sorts of other nonsense. They won't be able to do that this time. We'll basically be able to blockade them all inside, because if we put a ring right round Parliament, they're going to have to see someone to get out or in. So that'll be quite interesting. We'll definitely make it.
Yes, it's another demonstration of what I'm talking about as the people's sovereignty.
Exactly.
MSPs become aware of the fact that the people are out there, not in there.
Yeah.
And who's doing more work to obtain our independence, the people or the MSPs? I don't want to go too far into that because I can get very cynical about that. Right, let's jump into another negative for a second. Edinburgh West. There's another example of where, in some ways, and it's true of Scotland, we've become our own worst enemies. We've got two people wanting to stand in the same seat. How will that go, Dave?
I hope it goes for Joanna Cherry. I seriously hope it goes for Joanna Cherry. I have reasons for that. Some of the reasons that might well come out during the Salmon inquiry. I'm not going to go into that. It is a proxy fight for the soul of the SNP. The SNP that actually got up to about 5 years ago, till Nicola Sturgeon took over. The SNP it was an opposition party that became a government party, that was very much that had fire because they were always fighting against something, and now they've turned to people who are fighting to protect the status quo, and they've lost the fire. I'm not saying that about all the SNP. I'm saying that there's a certain faction in the leadership that seems to be encouraging that and fostering a lot of new, young wannabes to come in, and gradually the old people are like, I mean, Mike Russell, what a loss to independence. all right, he's not been lost to independence. He says he's going to continue doing stuff. But I mean, he's one of the people you really want in the SNP, and he's gone. It's like Fergus Ewan, all those really, really. The one good thing is that I'm seeing is James Dornan's actually rescinded his thing to retire. He's going to stay on, which is a good thing. But no, I mean, Angus, it was Nicola's number 2 for a while, and about as useful at it as
it depends on your age when you're looking at these things. For me, there's a kind of go back to Clause 4 in the Labour Party,
yep,
and the introduction of New Labour,
yep,
and where that led to in an Iraq war. There's a similarity in this whereby what was the cause? The cause was independence, and we drift and we drift and we drift. Let's go on to something. Again, I think Facebook and Twitter will be full of people taking sides between Joanna Cherry and Angus Robertson.
Well,
and that again is where I worry about the focus on independence. So let's go on to something where we can focus totally on independence. We can focus on the sovereignty of the people. We can demonstrate it, which is something you and I have spoken about with Diane Matheson and the people involved, which is a long walk to freedom,
yep,
which will start on a famous date, the 18th of September. The purpose of it, I see as being a demonstration, much like the 500 miles, of where very brave people intend to walk long distances, not for the effect of walking long distances, but to be able to demonstrate in every single village they go through, every town they go through, and every city they go through, and bring the Yes movement together with a purpose in this case, which is the covenant, the digital covenant, which is to publicise exactly what that's involved. Now, you and I have had our own discussions about this, but basically, some of the worries about it are over security. At some stage, Dave, maybe we'll do a program on that, but I've been given assurance, and I've got enough technical knowledge to know this, that the information you provide to the digital covenant is kept secure in terms of at military grade security. But here's the strange thing, from me anyway, anyone that questions, I'm worried about my details being hacked or whatever. If you've got a bank account, if you've got a Facebook page, if you ever take part in Twitter, the information that's gathered and is out there and can be hacked by anyone. There was a recent hack of a company called, I think it's Garvin, and they were held to hostage for all their information, right? Equifax, one of the major worldwide credit reference agencies, was hacked in the United States. Everyone's personal details, their financial details, their social security number, including about 500,000 people in the UK. The hack was done in the US, but the information affected the UK as well. Anything on the internet can be hacked. It's just a fact of life. We've got to be aware of it. But what you're going to provide in personal details to the digital covenant is very small, is secured, and is less than you do if you're watching this on Facebook. There is more information gathered by Facebook and Twitter than will ever be gathered on the security aspects of what you're putting in. However, there was an article by Jim Fairley today in The National where he starts talking very powerfully about the same message I try and get across, which is the people are sovereign. And he's talking about it in terms of sending a message to Westminster. And I want to use just a few minutes to talk about that. In the next 4 months, partly because of the long walk to freedom, everyone in Scotland, no matter where you are, will be close to the walk. You can help support them, you can help give them hospitality, and you can also get involved in signing the covenant. And what we're looking for is for well over 2 million people to become involved in that before the end of this year. That is the most powerful message that can be sent, because it doesn't rely on a Section 30. It doesn't rely on the elections next May. And I mentioned the elections next May. At a very extreme level, we know that there's a power grab going on. Everyone in Scotland knows that. The worst example would be, could they close the Scottish Parliament? Let's leave that at the extreme end. What we do know is they're going to diminish the powers of the Parliament in inch by inch by inch. There's white paper already set up to deal with that. The one way the whole Yes movement can come together during that long walk to freedom starts on the 18th of September. There'll be a gathering in Edinburgh on the 5th of November. There'll then be an end point in Berwick, I think on the 30th of November.
Yes, I understand.
We've got 7 weeks where every single Yes person can get involved in the Covenant, spread the message to their friends, and by the end of this year, the majority of the sovereign people of Scotland will have a document which they can use. Dave, I'll let you go on to the United Nations part of this, but that to me is what we should be focusing on as a Yes movement. The avalanche of everything else negative will come out anyway. We're going to have to get through that. There's something very, very positive we can do, and we've got to encourage people to get involved. Over to you, my friend, about the United Nations.
Well, basically, as far as the Covenant's concerned, if it reaches the amount of signatures that we're aiming for, which is somewhere around I think 2.2 million actually, it gives you a majority of the voting age people in Scotland. When that's been done, and you can prove that a majority of Scots want it, you do away with things like politicians and parliaments and subsidiary things to Westminster completely, simply because what you actually need for international recognition is a proof that the people have actually asked for it. And because this will be done with blockchain, which I believe is using the same blockchain as the Ethereum currency, which has not been hacked yet, but also, as I say, if somebody was to hack it, do you think they would hack it for our blockchain, or decide that they were going to take the currency down? Because I know what I would do if I found a hack that was going to enable it to happen. I'd be going for the money, and I would assume most Tories would be as well. So anyway, so the Ethereum has not been hacked. The thing when you talk about hacks, you don't have to be hacked. People are giving away their information every single day on all sorts of ways. If you go to a supermarket and use contactless and you put your card in front of the scanner, you're giving far more information there onto something that can be read than you will be on something that's going to be encrypted by military style blockchain. So anyway, the United Nations.
Chapter 1.
Yes. United Nations, the Declaration, Chapter 1, basically deals with the right to self-determination. The whole cornerstone of the United Nations is built on that. If the Scottish people can show that they actually support the aims in the Covenant, and I'm going to actually post it up here so you can have a look at it. If 2.2 million Scots do that, and it's then presented. Oh, sorry. Let's go back a little bit. When
People's Assembly Day was where to go.
Yeah. when you sign the Covenant, it also gives you entry to a thing called the People's Assembly, which is basically will give you a right to have a say and a vote in what happens. It's like a people's parliament, if you like, and your entry to that will be the crypto thing that you get from your place.
Yes, you're given a unique identity, yeah, which only you can ever use.
Yeah,
it means you can vote on subjects that come up, and it takes me back, Dave, to why I mentioned the process around the earlier part, which is part of where they missed out.
Yeah,
former ministers. eventually, in an independent Scotland, we will not have a House of Lords or anything similar to that, but we must have a People's Assembly.
Yep.
And the Covenant linked to the People's Assembly is the first demonstration of how that can be achieved,
yep.
where we as the people go back to 1320 and they said, if we don't like the king any longer, we'll find another one. Thank you very much. It's a whole bundle of things that can be done. I'm a great believer in the power of recall of people
yep.
in Parliament, right? That is part of what can be built. But we've got to start it, and we've got to show a determination. That's why I'm stressing this focus on the sovereignty of the people. There is no greater demonstration of the wish for independence than if every yes supporter says, look, I can fall out over Joanna Cherry, I can fall out over Nicola Sturgeon or Alex Salmond. Concentrate on one simple thing. This country should be independent. That's what the Covenant allows us to do, without, as you said, Dave, without reference to politicians, without reference to arguments, without references to parliaments. It's the people who are sovereign, and it's the people that can take it forward. Zip.
Well, basically, this People's Assembly of 2.2 million people will then basically elect someone who's signed it. It could be anyone. It could be you. It could be me. It could be wee Jeannie down the road. It could be anyone. To present that to the United Nations, saying, look, the sovereign people of Scotland, the majority of the sovereign people of Scotland have decided that they support this. Will you support it? And at the end of the day, without overturning their own reason for being, they have to.
The interesting thing, Craig Murray wrote an article on this, and it's something I've pushed in some of the posts I've done. Kosovo was an applicant to the United Nations. The United Nations said, we would like legal opinion from around the world on whether or not Kosovo can be recognised. One of the people that gave that legal opinion was a lawyer on behalf of the UK government. And what he basically argued was that whenever a country or a people seek to choose to be independent, then no or little regard should be paid to the country from whom they wish to become independent. So in our case, Scotland wanting to be independent from the UK. That was the British government's argument. You don't pay attention to the country that they're leaving, you pay attention to the people who are asking to leave. The United Nations finally said there is no final decision in this. We will look at it case by case. But the case in favour, Dave, of the people of Scotland who are sovereign, saying we wish to be an independent country, is unassailable. And that's where I want the focus over the next 4 months to be. We're going to see the virus is still going to be with us. And as per what's happened in Spain and coming back, etc., no one can predict what's going to happen over the next 4 months. In Australia, the 6 million people in Victoria have all been locked down. It's just going to continue. As we go forward, we're going to see what's happening in the negotiations over Brexit and the economic calamity that that's going to cause. Everything, in my opinion, between now and the end of December depends on the people of Scotland, the yes people of Scotland, getting involved in the Covenant, because no one can attack us if we do that. It's ours. It's our independence, and we can state that as a people.
Right. Just to go back on what you said there, Mike, you made a wee mistake. It wasn't the United Nations. It was
not unknown, Dave.
It was the International Court of Justice. It was the ICJ. It wasn't the UN, which does make a kind of difference, because what the Kosovo and the people that asked were not the Kosovan government. It was a People's Council that was elected in Kosovo. That actually, and what they asked for was an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, was if they declared independence, would it be internationally acceptable? And it took 3 years to go through, but basically they came back and said yes, it would, and then they declared independence. And the only two states in the world that didn't recognise it are Spain and Serbia. Serbia for obvious reasons, Spain again for obvious reasons. And as I say, that is a way that could be done. It could have been done like before the Scottish Parliament was done in 1998. It could have been done then. It could have been done in 1966, just to take everybody's mind off the World Cup. It could have been done anytime.
See, my bottom line in this is, Dave, we recently had Boris Johnson do this tour of Scotland, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Yes movement can send Boris Johnson a message through the long walk to freedom. Dear Boris, the people of Scotland who want independence are going to get together. We're going to sign a covenant. We're not going to ever ask for your permission. We're just going to do it.
Yep.
We've got to push that so hard between now, during that walk, Dave, and at the meetings that take place in Edinburgh or Berwick or whatever else. Yes, groups have got to get involved. It's not just provide hospitality to people taking walk. You don't have to go in the whole walk. I'm not going to go in the whole walk. I think I'm too old to probably go far, but I know there's going to be part of the route where I can walk 10 miles and take part. I'm going to do that. I know I'm going to commit to other things, but the bottom line to the whole purpose of it is to get everyone in Scotland the opportunity to take part in the covenant, because it's the most important thing we as a Yes movement can take part in.
I think that Murray Black said in a town hall thing she was doing last year was that Scotland had sovereignty for one day on the 18th of September 2014, and they gave it away. I do not believe that. I do not believe that. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, if we do this thing on the walk and get out to people, you are sovereign. But the bottom line is, if you don't use it, then you're a slave. And everybody, what do we want? Independence. When do we want it? Now. Okay, sign the covenant.
That's how you get it.
Yes, and take it. Don't ask for it. Take it. It's yours. You were born for it.
As I said in an earlier programme, Dave, that when Scotland becomes independent, I don't want it to be, this is not negative, I don't want it to be because a leader has won it for us. I don't want it to be because a particular political party has won it for us. I want history to record it was the people of Scotland, the sovereign people of Scotland, that gained their independence. That's got to be, for me, the actual solution to the whole problem.
It sounds like the last line of Braveheart, but I'll let you off on it.
Let's jump on a wee bit. Talk about, we're getting a plethora of independence parties springing up everywhere. In an article, I think in the Herald, it was Tommy Sheridan that was asking Alex Salmond to come back, form a list party, and that would sweep the board. We've now had the Reverend Stuart Campbell saying that the Wings party is still under consideration. We've got the ISP, we've got the Alliance for Independence. How's all that going to play out? Is that more division?
It's. I think it's more frustration than division. I think there are parts of the Yes movement that coalesce to different ideas. As I say, like of the ones that are there at the moment, I find the Alliance the most attractive. But that being said and done, if Alex Salmond came out tomorrow and said, "Okay, right, I'm forming this party," I would be the first one in the line to sign up for it. As I believe most of Scotland would. So what Tommy Sheridan actually said in the article, I don't think it actually was an article. I think it was something that was taken through a podcast that he did with Barhead Boy. But like, yeah, I mean, if it happened, yes, it would. I mean, I reckon Alec would probably particularly after what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, I reckon Alec would be well in for taking at least half of the SNP list vote. And that would put him ahead of Labour and very close to the Tories, assuming that the Tories could actually get the same votes they did last time under Ruth Davidson, now that they've got Lawson Carjack doing his bit. Because, I mean, he is no way, he doesn't have the presence that Davison had. Everybody treats him as a joke, including most of his own party. So you could actually end up with an SNP government and an Alex Salmond opposition, and that would be incredible. And I noticed wee Willie Rennie complaining to the Electoral Commission yesterday, yep, about the alliance, saying, they can't do this, they can't do this, completely forgetting the fact that he colluded with Plaid Cymru, the Greens, and the Party for Change in the South Wales recall election in September 2019, so that they would all vote Liberal Democrats to beat the Tory, and he was quite happy for them to do it then.
I always think of someone like Willie Rennie, anyone from Lib Dems, Labour or Conservatives in the Scottish Parliament. The chances of them forming an administration is near laughable. But we're paying each one of them £63,000 a year. So I think it's 63,000. When they've got expenses, they just submit them. And we're paying for all of that. That is an absolute... I'm going to declare an interest here. I'm not being arrogant for this, but I'll take credit for the fact that the name Alliance for Independence was my creation at a meeting in Clydebank with those in the steering group. It then became evident that I was a troublemaker, that I was going to cause them problems as they went forward, because some of the views I had were entirely different. But the reason that when Pat Lee asked me to become involved, the reason I did is I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that we've ignored the importance of the list vote, because the majority of people who were yes were avid SNP supporters, and when they were told SNP 1 and 2, it was absolutely natural for them to follow that lead. Yeah. However, I think we've got to the stage where people are beginning to realise, hang on a minute, have we thought this through? Now, one of the things that I think will happen, and in a way I hope will happen, once the committee inquiry is over, once Alex Salmond has maybe put out his book, maybe as he takes a deep breath and says, right, that's now behind me, I've had my say, I've opened up what I wanted to open up. It's a man who has dedicated his life to the independence of Scotland. I hope he does not forget that there's a lot of people will support him if he continues the fight that he's always fought. I'm not absolutely a great supporter of Alex Salmond as a person, and I say that on the basis of I took no part, Dave, in the first independence referendum. Nothing on the windows, nothing on the car, whatever. But I watched what was going on. And it takes me back again to the Covenant. There was a white paper issued, and we were going to keep the Queen. Not everyone agrees with that. Mm-hmm. We were going to share the pound. Not everyone, particularly me, agrees with that. So the strategy in that white paper, in my opinion, was completely and utterly wrong. Because it wasn't trying to define Scotland as an independent country. It was trying to convince soft-nosed a lot of other people, look, we're not going to make a mess of everything. Yeah. That is the wrong way to define yourself as independent. My hope is that Alex Salmond recognises that. And when he comes back, he can convince the rest of us. Now, I mentioned the currency side. Just briefly, you know I've taken an active part in that, and I've been very coy about taking it further forward. Now is the time to take it forward. There's a lot of people beginning to catch up with the ideas I started when I went round with the bottle and the pound note, the pound coin going into that. I won't do it today, but expect that to develop further and watch what happens with it, because people are beginning to understand that we need an independent central bank. That was the bottle going into the Parliament with the coins. We need our own currency. But the first thing we need is a payment system, and that is what's going to come out very shortly. Zip.
Aye, when you're talking about your central bank, you know a bit more of this than me. Would it be possible to take the investment bank and turn it into a central bank
No, two entirely different purposes.
Right, okay.
Your investment, it depends how you look in this. The investment bank is a way of saying, right, can we put some money in and then pull in money from elsewhere?
Yeah.
A person that's giving a lot of advice to the current Scottish government is an economist. I'm going to try and remember her name in a second. Mariana Mazzucato. And one of the things she did, and this is where, funnily enough, I'm going to sound like Tommy Sheridan for a minute. She's an economist who's done a lot of studies into large companies like Google or Microsoft, etc., where the initial money that got it going was actually government money, but it never retained an interest in the company. It just went private. And one of the arguments she makes is, look, that is not the way to do this. You should retain power, influence over the companies that you're putting money into. It's not that all are going to be successful, but some that are going to be very successful, you should retain an interest in it because it's you that's put the money up to actually develop it. Where I mentioned Tommy Sheridan, I agree with him totally, and it's perfect at the moment. Look what's going on with the vaccine for COVID.
Yeah.
David McGuinness mentioned a pal of his, David Milligan, and I think this is correct, that his wife was one of those taking part in the trials in Oxford for a vaccine. That trial will eventually lead to someone like Merck or GSK developing a vaccine. Will Mrs. Milligan get paid for her part in developing the vaccine? No. Will we retain a share in the value of that vaccine produced by a British university? No. That's where we start going wrong. That's where the investment bank is directed, Dave. The central bank has to do with the ability to issue currency. And if it has that ability, you are an independent country. That was what was wrong with the original white paper. It was saying we'll pass the responsibility for regulation, for monetary policy to George Osborne. That is a nightmare made in hell. Watch what's going on at the moment. They're borrowing money as though there was no tomorrow. Also takes you into the Growth Commission, which is now so out of date.
Yeah. Where
the proposal was we as an independent country should pay in perpetuity for the national debt. It's not our debt.
Yeah.
We've already paid for it. We send money to London and it builds Crossrail and it builds HS2 and it does all the things that London and the South East need. It's rubbish.
And it's not debt.
Of course it's not debt.
It's somebody's just printing money and threw it at you.
Well, it's a long subject. I'll deal with it in a separate page, Dave, not on here.
Okay.
Last but not least, we'll have an SNP conference, a virtual conference. We know that Chris McElhenney, who we've had on, will be putting his proposals forward. We know that Jim Fairley will be putting his proposals forward. I don't know how that's going to go, but that's what takes me back. I want you to speak on it at the SNP conference, but it takes me back again to the Covenant. Whenever you see a pyramid, there's a top and there's a bottom. The majority of the yes movement are at the bottom. We keep referring back up to the top of the pyramid. That's what I want to see change. I want to see the sovereign people do it. I think, and I'll ask for your comment on it, I think the SNP conference will be a demonstration of that. Will Chris McElhenney be booed for a second time? Will Jim Fairley be listened to? And I know you've got a particular thing that's been put forward that you want to see go through.
Yeah, I noticed the other day that SNP CND had put forward a proposal to have nuclear weapons kicked out within 3 years of Scotland being declared independent. And I completely support that. As I say, like, for me, getting rid of the nuclear weapons is almost as important itself as gaining independence. It's really that important. So, like, I think that's something that's very, very interesting. And you're now noticing that these resolutions have been passed around the parties to get their delegates in time to vote for it. That's happening now. So I would assume that that Chris and Angus have got their plan B one ready to go through. I would assume that certain people in the SNP will be briefing the local branches to vote against it, or get their delegates to vote against it. I think the one that Jim Fairley's putting up is by far the most interesting foot in the door way of being able to hold everybody together. Yep. As I say, plan B is the plan A. Yeah, it's automatically confrontational. What Jim Fairley says is like to just retake control of the constitution that was stolen in the Scotland Act in 1998, and that can be done. It can be done. So instead of actually saying that if we get a majority, we'll declare independence. If we get a majority, we'll retake the control of the constitution, and then we can hold it without any court being able to say anything about it. And
imagine, Dave, that by the end of this year, that Jim's proposal will go forward at the conference.
Yep.
Say it's adopted. The implementation of that would be at the Parliament in May elections.
Yes.
Imagine before that. Imagine before the end of this year, over 2 million sovereign Scots have signed the covenant to say we want this done. That is sending a very, very powerful. You can't send a more powerful message to Westminster than that the people have decided what is to be done.
You're not sending a message just to Westminster. You're sending one to everyone. You're sending a message to the world that basically Scotland have had enough of being put in boxes by inferior people. And I'm talking about over both parliaments. It's happened. And Westminster and the Scottish Parliament. I mean, it's not that long ago we were being ruled by a Liberal Democrat coalition, who have all hived off to the House of Lords now, so they can run around with the wee-red coats. So yeah, it's no. It needs to be done. I mean, even if the SNP suddenly get their act together and say, right, okay, our conference in September or October is going to be, we're going to go down and we're going to absolutely batter them, and everybody believes and actually do it, we still need the covenant.
Absolutely.
Because the bottom line is, at the end of the day, it's like the SNP are a construct, the Scottish government are a construct at Westminster. They are a construct at Westminster. Their existence is owed to the Scotland Act, which is a Westminster bill, a Westminster Act. And there's no way around it. They can change that anytime they like. They can wipe it out anytime they like. At the stroke of it, they don't even need to put it through Parliament anymore. They can now do it with secondary legislation, using the eighth powers. And so whether they will or not, the bottom line is, who gave them the right to be able to, whether they use it or not? And that's the question. We have got the right to remove them. And all you have to do is go to the digitalcovenant.scot and sign up. And when 2.2 million of you have, Westminster, the UK is over. End of.
So final message from me, Dave, to anyone I know in the Yes movement. If you haven't signed the covenant, get involved. No matter what happens over the next 4 months, which is negative, do something positive. Do it for Scotland. Do it for Scotland's independence.
Thanks very much for kind of tuning in again today, guys. We hope we've given you some food for thought. As I say, like we've all got our own ideas. We've all got our own people that we support, and we've all got our own reasons for doing so. The bottom line is, do we want independence? Yes or no? That's how we can do it together. Just later.